Hello, everybody, and welcome back to my podcast. So it's been a little bit of time since my last episode, and I'm glad that you guys are tuning in with me today. I really enjoyed the last episode, by the way, where I sort of tried to show as best as I could that the Republican Party is becoming a fascist organization, literally, not just in the minds of angry leftists who like to call everybody who disagrees with them fascists, but actually from a historical and academic perspective, that the Republican Party is definitely well on its way to becoming the fascist party in the United States. And I think that everybody should check that episode out if you haven't seen it yet. And I thought today we would continue to explore that theme a little bit. So before we get into it though, a little bit, some housekeeping. I've been kind of going back and forth with sort of the vision that I have for this podcast. On the one hand, I did enjoy doing the research and the legwork and kind of preparing something a little bit more robust for you in my previous episode. But on the other hand, it took quite a bit of time. And by raising that bar, ironically enough, I found that I wanted to sort of continue with a similar approach, and I ended up starting to procrastinate it a bit, and more time went by, and now it's been maybe 2.5 weeks since that episode. And I have prepared something today. I did do at least a fair amount of background research and stuff, but I think that that in the future I'm going to want to mix it up a little bit, because I want to make these episodes a little bit more regular. I want to try to form a habit of producing them, but I also, the time that I have available to me is limited, and I'm starting to work again, and things like this. So in order to make this happen, the decision that I'm sort of playing with, nothing set in stone yet, but the decision that I'm sort of playing with is that occasionally I'll make a deeper and more researched podcast for your enjoyment. And in between these deeper, better researched, more thorough, more robust podcasts, I'll just have some random Chell rants. I still also, by the way, do intend to have a number of interviews this season. The season could last for all of 2021, but there will be interviews for sure. So occasionally some in-depth, hard-hitting, researched podcasts, and to sort of balance it out in between some more just Chell rants off the top of his head, whatever comes to mind in the moment. So that's sort of the idea that I'm playing with moving forward here, and I thought I would just kind of give you guys a little bit of a heads up. But that being said, today I want to continue to look at fascism. I think it's a fascinating topic. I think that it gets, on the one hand, it gets a lot of attention from media and also from academics, at least in the last 20, 30 years. But on the other hand, it has kind of a forbidden science quality to it. And that's something that I would like to dispel, because, looking at my own kind of political development, when I decided to become an anarchist, half of the reason, if I'm being totally honest with myself, half of the reason that I made that decision was because anarchism was something sexy, something forbidden, something, that polite society kind of looked down on. And that made it very attractive. And I fear that the rise that you see in sort of alt-right, proto-fascist, and straight-up fascist thinking, especially among young men on the internet, that part of the explanation for that rise is a kind of seductive quality of fascism, because specifically it's this forbidden knowledge. Everybody always hates fascism, and it gives it a strange sort of ironic, allure. And that's something that I want to dispel. I want to really make it very clear that fascism is not sexy. I mean, my God, look at the old Indiana Jones movies. I mean, those Nazi gentlemen were always dressed quite dapper. And I guess they did have, designed uniforms, but that seems to be a bit replacing the cover for the book, right? Like, just because they dressed well and just because it's not socially acceptable to be a fascist doesn't mean that fascism should therefore be more attractive, especially to young men in the West. Yeah. So, in my effort to kind of dispel some of the mystique around fascism, to make it a little bit more, obvious how banal and disgusting it is, I've decided to embark on a little bit of a series. Now, I don't know how many parts the series is going to have. Maybe it's just a one-part series. Can a series have one part? You tell me. It's a very philosophical question. But I'm going to call this series, I'm going to name it Triangulating Fascism. And today will be the first episode of this series, Triangulating Fascism. And what I want to look at specifically today is a little bit of the intellectual, pseudo-intellectual side of this kind of incipient, growing fascist movement in the United States. And I touched on this a little bit in the last episode, but I want to, explore it a little bit more today. And I'm going to focus today more or less exclusively on the Heritage Foundation. So, in the course of this episode, I'm going to try to answer the question: is the Heritage Foundation really like a fascist think tank? And the answer is going to be, it's a little bit complex. It's a little bit of a yes or no, or as they would say in German, a Jein, a ja and a nein, yeah. A yes and a no. But yeah, we're going to be looking at the Heritage Foundation today. And in order to do that, the first step, obviously, is to give a little bit of background information about the Heritage Foundation. And that's what I'm going to do right now. The Heritage Foundation is a conservative think tank. And you wouldn't be wrong to maybe assert that the Heritage Foundation is the conservative think tank, not just in the United States, but globally. It is an extremely powerful and extremely influential political think tank, conservative think tank. And what is a conservative think tank? What is a think tank? Yeah, well, a think tank is where thoughts are born. So maybe you've noticed, if you spent some time looking at politics or online, you've noticed that there tend to be certain talking points that different political positions will repeat. Democrats will say similar things using a very similar language over and over again. Republicans will say similar things. Conservatives will say similar things. Leftists will say similar things. And it's like all of these, and you might wonder, well, where do all of these thoughts come from then? How is it the case that, it can't be the case that all conservatives just suddenly hit on the same idea simultaneously. And of course, that's not what happens. These ideas are born in think tanks. And these think tanks are more or less well-funded. Maybe they have billionaire backers. Maybe they're just a grassroots organization. But they exist specifically to tell people who align with their political ideology what to think. Yeah, and that's what the Heritage Foundation does, and it's extremely successful at it. So let's look a little bit at what the Heritage Foundation says about itself. So the Heritage Foundation says that unlike so many other organizations, I'm quoting this, by the way, this is quote, open quote, quoting from their website, from Heritage Foundation website. So, quote, unlike so many other organizations in Washington, D.C., our focus isn't on putting more power into the hands of government. It's on returning power to the people. Our job is about working on behalf of the American people, not on behalf of any special interest or political party. So that's the mission statement. That's what the Heritage Foundation says that it's doing, and it sounds great. Putting power in the hands of the people. Small government is one of those main talking points in conservative circles. We want a smaller government, and don't pay attention to our massively bloated military budgets. When we talk about small government, we basically mean a positive regulatory environment. But yeah, small government, get government out of the lives of the people. Give power to the people, right? And so, there's something attractive about that initially. Like I said, insofar as I'm an anarchist, I also believe in small government, right? There is no government smaller than some sort of like utopian anarchy, right? But I guess the first question that I would ask of the Heritage Foundation is, who are the people? So they're returning the power to the people, and they say the American people. It sounds like the masses, but is that really who they're supporting? And they say they're not working on behalf of any special interest or political party. Well, can we believe that? And I think that a good place to start trying to answer that question, is this mission statement true? A good place to start is to look at the board of trustees. Who runs and operates and makes decisions about the Heritage Foundation? So I did that. I mean, it's easy to do. You go to the Heritage Foundation website, and it's right there. And I took a look at their board, and there's a lot of people on the board. I'm not going to go through all of them. I'm going to look at just a few of the bigger names on the board, and we're gonna try to see, based on the people who control this organization, whose interest does the organization probably support. And I mean, this is not. I could be wrong, right? I mean, let's imagine that the board was made up of farmers. And you might think, well, if the board is all farmers, then probably the organization supports the interests of farmers. But, I mean, maybe they don't. They don't necessarily have to. I mean, we could imagine a world where a bunch of farmers support the interests of video game players. It doesn't make any sense, but, I mean, it's something that you can think. It's theoretically possible, yeah? But I think most likely, the people on the board, because they make decisions about how this organization operates, are also probably influencing the output of this organization. And, insofar as the board is more diverse, then the interest of any particular group will have less overall weight, right? So if you saw a board of people of many different backgrounds, many socioeconomic levels, all of these sorts of things, then you could assume that the different interests within the board, that there's enough of them that no one interest is sort of, more powerful or more present than any other. So we'll find out. Is that the case? How does this board look? Let's start at the very top. Let's start with the chairman of the board, which is Barb Van Andel Gabi, which is quite a name. Barb. I guess Barb is short for Barbara. Barbara Van Andel Gabi, and she's the chairman of the Heritage Foundation, and she's also. I don't know. Maybe you know the name Andel Gabi. She's also on the board of Alticor. So this is something I'm going to tell you right now. It's a little bit of a trend that you see when you look at the board of the Heritage Foundation. Often people who are on the board of the Heritage Foundation are also on other boards. Yeah, which is interesting. Maybe we talk a little bit about that. But she's on the board of Alticor Company, which is a massive company, the parent company of Amway. And in fact, the Andel family, co-owns this Alticor company with the DeVos family, like Betsy DeVos, Trump's Secretary of Education. So, Already there seems to be a connection to money. There seems to be a little bit about money here, yeah? And, Barb van Andel Gabi, I think, is a very wealthy person. I mean, she owns her own island where she has a resort that she used to be the CEO of. It seems that if you own your own island, probably you're pretty well to do. Probably you're pretty well. The island, by the way, is in British Virgin Islands, and the resort that she owns there can be only reached by boat or, and they're very clear about this on the website, by helicopter. So you can fly yourself into the island. And some other fun facts about Barbara van Andel Gabi. She is an avid promoter of homeschooling. In fact, she's a member of the Georgia Home Education Association and the Homeschool Legal Defense Association. And according to her bio on the Heritage Foundation site, she has homeschooled all 6 of her children, of which 3 have graduated. So those are pretty good numbers, right? I mean, 50% graduation rate. It's really good. But I mean, let's be honest though. The other 3, having already been taught the most important lesson by their mother, that they are better than other people because they're rich, have made the only real rational choice available to them, which is to stop their education and to live on the family yacht that's parked, of course, at the family island. So yeah, so that's the chairman of the foundation. She's also on the board of one of the wealthiest companies in the world, and a company that she happens to co-own with the DeVos family, which is one of the wealthiest families in the world. So we're off to a great start. But again, what we're looking for is diversity in the board. Hopefully we're also going to get a bunch of working class blokes. So the vice chairman is a certain Michael Gleba. I'm probably mispronouncing his name. And he's in addition to being the vice chairman of the Heritage Foundation, he's also the treasurer of the Sarah Skife Foundation, which was founded by Sarah Mellon Skife. And of course, I don't know how familiar you are with the names of extremely wealthy families in the United States, but Mellon and Scaife, just like Andel Gabi of the chairman, both Mellon and Scaife are extremely wealthy American families. Mellon, of course, is the Mellon banking family, the Mellon banking fortune, super wealthy family. And the Scaife comes from Alan McGee Scaife, which was a very wealthy industrialist in the United States. And so Vice Chairman Michael Gleba is on the Sarah Scaife Foundation, which gives him ties to the Mellon banking fortune. Additionally, he sits on 7 other boards. So he's a member of 7 other boards of major companies. And a fun fact about Michael Gleba, he's never met a poor person in his whole life, not a single poor person. So, if he says differently, don't believe him. But okay, so we have 2 extremely wealthy people, but I mean, okay, this is just the chairman and the vice chairman. I mean, the rest of the board is probably going to be, more down to earth, sort of salt of the earth conservatives, right? I mean, that's who the think tank, that's their audience, that's their demographic. I mean, they want to talk to, the real people, the red-blooded Americans. So let's see who. Let's move on. We have another, now just the trustee list. We have a trustee and the former chairman. He used to be a chairman, but now he's just a trustee. Thomas Saunders III. Okay, I mean, we should, before even moving on, I mean, the third, right? I mean, probably he's the third son of a coal miner. I mean, usually coal miners name their third sons third, right? I mean, that's pretty common. I mean, there's no reason to think that Thomas Saunders III is a rich person. But I mean, let's take a little closer look. Is Thomas Saunders III is a trustee? Is he a rich person? Well, he was the managing director of Morgan Stanley for 15 years, and at that time he made a ton of money for Exxon and AT&T. In his role as managing director of Morgan Stanley, he got all these awards for making Exxon and AT&T super rich, until AT&T had to face all these anti-monopoly suits and stuff. But he's also on the board of Dollar Tree, which is a Fortune 500 company. It sells stuff for $1. Yeah, but it's also it's a major company in the United States. And so it looks like this guy's also quite rich. He's an advisor for 2 major hedge funds in the U.S. And I think he's no stranger to money. Sounds like a real rich guy. So okay, we got so far a lot of rich people on the board of Heritage Foundation, real rich people, creme de la creme rich, rich. But and there's been 1 white woman and 2 white men that we've looked at so far. But let's look at the president, because the president is different. Because the president is Kay Cole James, and she's a black woman who comes from a working class background, and she's worked her way into the upper echelons of conservative circles. Yeah, she's done an amazing job for herself. Her resume is phenomenal. Yeah, I mean, she has worked for Reagan, she worked for Papa Bush, she worked for Baby Bush, she worked for Trump, she's worked for multiple governors. She sits herself on multiple boards and other, political advocacy groups. She has just a totally unbelievable resume, and of course, she's also a diversity hire. So now I can just feel the wrath. First off, if you want to trigger somebody at the Heritage Foundation, just say that their president, Kay Cole James, is a diversity hire. I mean, they would not be happy with that at all, especially since they are anti-woke and anti-affirmative action, and they would never willingly admit that they chose that the choice of a black female woman to run to be the president of their organization has any sort of public relations benefit for them or anything like that. No, absolutely not. It's just because of her resume. And honestly, saying that she's a diversity hire, even as somebody who tries and sometimes fails, but tries to be woke, to be careful and to be reflective with the language that I use, even I find that to be a little bit of an insulting statement, a little bit triggering, and that would be something perhaps to reflect on for myself, because of course I am pro affirmative action. I like the idea of having quotas for underprivileged people to sort of boost them and carve out space, help them carve out space for themselves in the corporate world, in the social world, and academia, and all different sorts of areas. But no, I honestly think that Kay Cole James, the president of the Heritage Foundation, is a diversity hire, and I'm not just, this is not just speculation. Let me read you a quick passage from her bio on the Heritage Foundation. So, if you go to the Heritage Foundation, you look at President Kay Cole James, you read her bio. There's a lot there. In one section, they say, quote, "A devout Christian. Her experience growing up in poverty with a mother on welfare and an alcoholic father played a profound role in fundamentally shaping her views on the importance of family and religion, the value of education, the need for welfare reform, and the repeated failure of well-intentioned government programs, especially in America's urban communities. It is, as she has often said, I didn't become a conservative despite my roots. I became a conservative because of them." So that's a very interesting passage. First and most importantly, there is a clear reference to the racist Reagan trope welfare queen. Like, here's a black female, who's the president of the Heritage Foundation, and in her bio, it's like, yeah, and her mother was on welfare. Essentially, she's the child of a welfare queen and an absent father. Okay, they don't say absent father, they say alcoholic father. But I mean, okay, this experience for Kay Cole James was probably foundational. It probably had played a big role in how she developed as a human being, and we shouldn't downplay it. We shouldn't say, just she had a welfare mom and she was poor, and and they're just using that. But nevertheless, they are just using it, right? This is a conservative think tank that constantly talks about the abuse of the welfare system, and sort of is in reference to especially single black mothers, welfare queens. When Reagan said welfare queen, he was talking about single black mothers. That's why it's a racist trope, and it's a well-known racist trope, and it's a well-known conservative talking point, and it's in the bio of their president, who is the only black person and the only black female person on their entire board of directors. So forgive me if I think that it sounds a little bit like a diversity hire. It's a little bit like, oh, hey, look, we have this black female conservative whose mother was a welfare queen, whose father was absent, and she's still a conservative. She's like one of those good black people. Yeah, and that's kind of fucked up, in my opinion. That's kind of fucked up. And again, this is just my opinion, and maybe you disagree. Maybe you say, no, it's not a diversity hire. But I don't know. It just seems that her appointment fulfills a number of PR goals for the Heritage Foundation, right? I mean, she's a successful conservative, anti-affirmative action, anti-welfare, powerful voice, and therefore she's a great role model for black people. And stories like hers lets conservative avoid having to talk about things like racial justice or centuries of slavery or any of that. And oh yeah, of course she's the president of like a proto-fascist conservative propaganda machine. So, I don't know. I just think it's kind of fucked up. But her background, her biography aside, I mean, she also has bad opinions, just like all the rest of them. For example, she recently wrote an article entitled, last week, wrote an article entitled "The $15 minimum wage would most hurt the people it's intended to help." And here you go. This is like classic. Now like modern classic conservative talking point, right? Because the idea is, and she writes, quote, "When businesses are forced to pay employees more with no corresponding increase in revenues to help pay for it," which is also interesting. Why would there be no corresponding increase in revenue? I don't know. But when businesses are forced to pay employees more with no corresponding increase in revenues to pay for it, they have to resort to some combination of cutting employees' hours, laying off employees, replacing employees with automation, shipping jobs overseas, permanently closing their doors, or passing the costs on to consumers. We've already seen this happen when states and localities have raised the minimum wage on their own. So this is like probably the most popular conservative argument against raising the minimum wage, that if you make the cost of labor higher, then companies are going to have to lay off people or outsource or automate. Yeah, and on the surface, it seems like a good argument. In fact, recently, ThoughtSlime Eyeball Zone, Thought Slime. But recently Thought Slime did an episode where he, destroys the arguments against raising the minimum wage. And it's an excellent episode. I'll put a link in the description, and maybe you can check out his episode. And he points out, that the only problem with this argument is that if companies could save a ton of money by doing these things, like cutting employees' hours or laying off employees or replacing employees with automation or shipping jobs overseas, if they could do this, they would do it. It's not like, I don't know, there's a bunch of like wealthy business owners sitting around thinking, well, I could make a bunch more money, but I'm not going to unless the government decides to raise the minimum wage. Like, why would they say that? It seems more like if they saw a way of making a bunch more money by cutting wages and stuff, that they would already have done that. So I don't know. I just don't know if that argument holds much water. Also, at the very beginning, when businesses are forced to pay employees more with no corresponding increase in revenue to help pay for it, why wouldn't there be an increase in revenue? Assuming that your business makes something or sells something, is service oriented or product oriented, then if everybody has more money, then you're going to sell more or that thing, right? Like, okay, maybe if you make Tesla, a $15 minimum wage is not going to sell more Teslas because they're fucking super expensive. Because the best way to save the environment is to sell extremely expensive cars to rich people, so rich people can feel good about having a smaller carbon impact. By the way, but yeah, but if it's McDonald's, and if you get a bunch of McDonald's workers and a bunch of people in Walmart and Amazon factories and all of these, already relatively, way underpaid positions, if they all get an increase in wage, and they're going to order more from Amazon and eat more hamburgers and buy more, things at Walmart, right? So you're going to see revenues go up for these companies. Anyway, I think it's a bad argument. And there's no real good evidence for it. There are some. There is some evidence. There's like mixed, papers in economics saying, well, maybe it will increase unemployment, maybe it will decrease unemployment if you raise the minimum wage. But it doesn't seem like there's any really clear, definitive answer. And it's just a scare tactic that conservatives use to try to convince everybody that raising the minimum wage is a bad idea. I think it's a bad argument, but she continues. She also talks about that, she decides to add a new twist to it. This is maybe the Heritage Foundation putting a new talking point in the bucket, like a new drop in the bucket of talking points. Does that make sense? And she argues that a minimum wage hike will mean that poorer families and single parents won't be able to afford childcare for their children, which is, of course, a necessity because in poor households or in single parent households, the parents have to work all day. So who's going to take care of their kids, especially if the kids are too young to go to school? And somebody's got to pay for somebody to take care of that. So and it seems that if you have a $15 minimum wage, you're going to have to, these working parents who can barely pay rent and feed their children as it is at their current wage, now suddenly they're going to have this additional expense of having to pay their babysitter $15 minimum wage. So, a couple things here. First off, I imagine that if you look at a lot of lower income and single parent, working class families, if they do have childcare, it's probably not like professional childcare. They're probably not hiring an expensive nanny to come and take care of their kids while they're at work. It's probably like a babysitter. And I don't know if the minimum wage hike would, like when I worked as a babysitter growing up, I wasn't paid minimum wage. I was paid whatever the parents thought was a fair amount for my time. Sometimes, you give like $5 an hour or something or less, because, I was only 14 and I was taking care of a 7-year-old. And, how much do you pay a 14-year-old for an hour of playing video games with your 7-year-old? I don't know, right? I don't know. So I'm not sure if there would actually be the same, if all of this childcare would actually be required to pay more. However, let's assume that's the case. Let's assume that all the babysitters and the nannies suddenly they have to pay them $15. That would be a large increase, but keep in mind that the parents who are working class are probably also earning minimum wage. So they would also have a lot more income to spend. So there's that. All right. And, but even leaving both of those points aside, it seems that, in this conservative mind, there's just no room for any other kinds of solutions. Like, what about like subsidies for childcare? Maybe the government can step in. I mean, of course, the conservative says, no, the government is always bad. We don't want to rely on the government for anything except bombing brown people around the world. That's the job of the government. And we'll pay endless money for that. But some small subsidies for childcare for low-income working-class families? Absolutely not. What is this, fucking communist China? And or maybe there could be some sort of mandatory daycare provision from employers, from companies. I mean, wow, imagine that. You could take your kid to the company in the morning, at least if it's a big one. Maybe smaller shops, this would be less feasible. But like for these big companies that employ, tens, hundreds of thousands of people in the United States, maybe they could have a daycare facility at the company. You could drop your kid off. There would be some, somebody would take care of your kid, watch over them during the day, play games, the whole thing, and then when you're at the end of the day, you pick them up from the daycare, you take them home, and you don't have to pay for that. I mean, it just seems like a simple solution, or at least something to think about, something to something not to be ignored out of hand, right? Yeah, but of course not, right? It's the personal responsibility of the underpaid and the systematically exploited worker to provide or pay for childcare. I mean, if you require owners or shareholders or board members to foot some of that bill, it's just totally out of the question. Because, power to the people, right? The Heritage Foundation is all about giving power back to the people, and the people are definitely board members. If you don't make 6 figures, 7 figures a year, then you're definitely not one of the people that the Heritage Foundation is interested in giving power to. Because it seems to me that if they really wanted to give power to the people, they would find a solution that would both increase the wages of most working people in the United States and make it so that those people could also afford early childhood childcare. That would be that, instead of saying, no, we're going to keep wages low because the market decides and these people are willing to work for almost nothing, and we're going to keep healthcare or childcare expensive. It seems that that's not really what people are benefiting from that. And it seems that the people who are benefiting from that are the owners of the company who are not willing to sacrifice pennies of their profit, which of course is just money that they stole from their employees. Whatever profit employers make is just money stolen from the people that are actually creating value in the company, namely the employees. And the idea of like giving any of those ill-gotten profits back, is just unthinkable. And why? Why is it unthinkable? Well, here's the Heritage Foundation to give you a bunch of bad reasons. And yet those bad reasons seem to convince a lot of people. And important, who do they convince? Well, let's go back to their website, the Heritage Foundation. And they say that the Heritage Foundation is really proud of the 3 things that it does. It does 3 things. Number 1 is effective research, and this is what triggers me more than anything else: is effective research. And they say they provide timely, accurate research on key policy issues, and that they do so in an independent research environment. Yeah, independent research environment. So that's point number 1. We'll talk a bit about it. Number 2 is superb communications. They effectively market our findings to primary audiences. Now that is that's the interesting point. The superb communications, effectively marketing our findings to primary audiences. Because then, of course, the question is, who are the primary audiences? And the primary audiences are politicians, media outlets like Fox News, and also your average conservative voter. The Heritage Foundation, much like PragerU, and maybe even slightly worse quality than PragerU, puts out a bunch of YouTube videos about these political issues and tells your average American conservative what to think about things like welfare and things like minimum wage and all of these stuff. And that is what they're really good at. They're really good at reaching these audiences, on telling politicians what to think about this, telling voters what to think about this, telling media outlets what to say about this. That is their true job. And finally, number 3, proven solutions pursue conservative policies to help Americans build a better life. And again, when they say Americans, they mean wealthy Americans, because they're not actually about helping lower class Americans at all. They're more than happy to throw them under the bus as long as it means windfall profits for the people at the top. But let's think a little bit, a minute longer here about this effective research claim that they provide timely, accurate research on key policy issues in an independent research environment. So first off, independent research environment is a euphemism for this is not peer-reviewed. We're not doing peer-reviewed academic research here. We're not going to let the academic establishment tell us what to think by submitting our research papers or commentaries or reports for any kind of peer-reviewed study or reflection. Yeah, because of course, if any of these things were actually peer-reviewed, if they tried to submit them to journals, they would be rejected out of hand. Because let me tell you, the quote-unquote research, these quote-unquote research reports that the Heritage Foundation puts out are hot garbage. I'm talking so bad. I mean, I was going to save this for later, but I'm just going to jump into my favorite one. My favorite one is an article written December 13th, 2019. It's by a Kim R. Holmes, which has a PhD, Dr. Kim R. Holmes. He's a dude. And he's the executive vice president at the Heritage Foundation. And he wrote an article, and it's called The Problem of Nationalism. Hey, this guy's got a PhD. So this is going to be some academic shit, right? I mean, this is a doctor. I mean, I didn't actually look up what he's got his PhD in. Maybe he's got his PhD in like underwater basket weaving from like University of like not a real place, but or it's probably what's that one? Hillsdale College, because if you want a PhD of value, get it at Hillsdale College, because they just give them out like candy. I'm actually looking at his bio right now. See if I can see what it says. Oh man, this guy's got a long bio. Oh, his scholarly articles have appeared in journals such as National Interest, Journal Aspenia, which is an Italian journal, and Harvard University's International Security, and Columbia's University Journal of International Affairs. My God, he's published in journals. So this guy knows what it takes to pass a peer review process. So let's look at this problem of nationalism. This article that he wrote for the Heritage Foundation. And he starts off, he says, quote, the first sentence here, at first glance, the new nationalism of conservatives will seem benign and even uncontroversial. So he says, hey, everybody, nationalism, and he even says, like, later, the one, like what Trump is saying. Trump says nationalism, and you might think that this is totally fine. But he says, but, nationalism has kind of a dark history. So he goes on to make probably one of the most ridiculous arguments that I have ever encountered in my entire life. I just can't even believe. I can't believe it. So he says, nationalism has a bad rap. And we don't, and therefore we don't want to be nationalists. We don't want to be nationalist Americans. No. What we want to do is we want to celebrate America, specifically America, and the values that America has. Because, of course, nationalism could be about any nation, right? Nationalism could be about any nation. All nations and all people are distinguished by what makes them different. And he says that nationalism, the nation that experiences nationalism, might also be an authoritarian nation, or it could be a communist nation, and there's still nationalism there. It could be a monarchy, it could be a feudalist nation. There's still nationalism there, and that's bad. We don't want to celebrate authoritarianism or communism or feudalism or monarchy. No. American exceptionalism is different from nationalism because it celebrates America. Right? Like mic drop, like damn dude, like slow clap, like single tear, because holy shit. What an amazing argument. Like I never thought that of how, wow, I mean, he really points out the key fundamental difference between nationalism and American exceptionalism, that nationalism can apply to any nation, but American exceptionalism only applies to America. Really. And it's like the guy's never seen a Venn diagram before, because clearly he's just put a circle inside of a larger circle. The larger circle, nationalism, and the smaller circle, American exceptionalism. And then he pretends like those two circles, they're not inside of, that one's not inside of the other, that they're totally different circles. But he talks about American exceptionalism. It's a beautiful concept that captures both the reality, and this is American exceptionalism, and this is different than nationalism, right? He says that it has different, it's philosophically different. He uses that word, So American exceptionalism is a beautiful concept that captures both the reality and the ambiguity of the American experience. It's based on a universal creed. It's grounded in America's founding principles: natural law, liberty, limited government, individual rights, and checks and balances of government, popular sovereignty, and not the sovereignty of the folkish nation state. The civilizing role of religion in civil society. This is all a big long list of of America's universal creed, the civilizing role of religion in civil society, and not an established religion associated with one class or one creed. And so that's it. That's the quality of independent research done by Heritage Foundation. Kim R. Holmes, PhD. Kim R. Holmes, there you have it. American exceptionalism is not nationalism, because it's not just about any nation. It's about America. Yeah, and nationalism is bad because maybe nationalism supports authoritarianism or racial identity. And America doesn't do that, because America, exceptionalism, is just about how great America is. And that's beautiful. It's beautiful, right? And this guy's got a fucking PhD, I mean, how do you explain that, right? Like, I mean, there's like three possibilities here, right? Possibility number one, and this is the most likely one, because as we know, he has published in actual academic journals. I mean, I haven't looked those journals up. Maybe they're a bunch of bullshit. But assuming that those were academic journals that he's published in, possibility number one, he knows this is a terrible argument, but, he's getting paid to write crap for gullible audiences. So he doesn't have to work very hard at it. Why work hard when you can just say a bunch of garbage? And, anyway, the people you're trying to sell on that garbage are fucking idiots. So it's, it'll work either way. Yeah, so that's possibility number one. Possibility number two, he's an idiot, and the standards for getting a PhD these days are just really fucking low, right? Just, oh my God, just give it to anybody, which honestly, I didn't get a PhD, and so that I'm kind of embarrassed about that. I mean, if it's that fucking easy, right? Like, what does it say about me? And or number three, he was just really fucking drunk when he wrote this article, or really high or something, smoked a big doobie and was like, oh man, dude, bro, did you ever think, like, actually American exceptionalism, it's not nationalism, bro, because it's not about just some nation like France. It's about America. I mean, talk about stupid. Anyway, so yeah, effective research, number one, and superb communications. I mean, he did communicate it very well. I mean, the article is a ton of blah blah, and he's it's like he doesn't want to get to the point. It's like at some point he realizes that the point is so embarrassing that he keeps like filler stuff. He keeps saying, oh, but let's talk about the economy, and oh, but let's talk about the history of nationalism. It started with the French Revolution. That's the beginning. And so, like, when the United States was founded, there was no such thing as nationalism. So if people were had an American identity before that time that they were proud of, that wasn't nationalism, because nationalism was founded by France during the French Revolution. And then he realizes, like, that's kind of a bunch of bullshit. So I should probably change the topic now. Let's talk about the economy. Yeah, anyway, so it's really awful. And and that's not it. I mean, there's a ton of it. Let's look at another one. Let's look at there's a Heritage Foundation has a video on Black Lives Matter, and they ask the tough questions. They want to know, what does Black Lives Matter actually stand for, quote unquote, actually stand for? And they say, to answer that question, look no further than their leaders. Which, I guess it's fair. I mean, that's essentially what I did at the beginning of this episode myself. I said, what does the Heritage Foundation actually stand for? Well, look no further than their leaders. They're all a bunch of fucking billionaires that are have ties to old money, that have, traditionally supported policies that only benefit the old money and don't benefit anybody else. But anyway, in this video with the BLM, they cut to this grainy clip from a decade ago of one of the leaders of the Black Lives Matter Foundation website saying, like in an interview, and she says, yeah, we're trained Marxists. That's like the whole clip. There's no context to it at all. She just says, we're trained Marxists. And then there's like super ominous music, like dun, 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 you know, like they're fucking Marxists. Now we know Black Lives Matter is really about Marxism, which, you know, I fucking hope it is, right? Like, I mean, if I'm critical of some of these Black Lives Matter things, is that they're not Marxist enough, you know. Nevertheless, and there's a long history of black activism and anti-capitalist Marxist communist thought, which is a really super fucking interesting history that should be explored further by any leftist that wants to know anything about anything. So. Cool. Good. And in the rest of the video, they're like, then they look at the Black Lives Matter website, and they're like, what are they really after? You know, let's look at their website. You know, doing some deep investigative journalism here, and they find a quote from their website, and the quote is from the Black Lives Matter website: "We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as an extended families and villages that collectively care for one another." And then it's like ominous music, and boy, does that sound terrifying, because they're trying to destroy the family. I mean, Heritage, you know, scored through the Black Lives Matter Foundation website and grainy interviews recordings from 10 years ago. And the best they came up with was that BLM is Marxist, and they think that it takes a village to raise a child, or that communities should support each other, you know. And then the video continues, quote, "The group's radical Marxist agenda would supplant the basic building block of society, the family, with the state, and destroy the economic system that has lifted more people from poverty than any other." That's what they say in the video, right? And it's okay. A few things here. First off, where did BLM say they wanted to replace the family with the state? I'm pretty sure the quote that you literally quoted in your video, like for the viewer on the screen, was that we disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure by supporting each other as extended families and villages that collectively care for one another. The word state doesn't appear. It's not like we want baby farms. The government will have baby farms like 1984, and then we'll all be like just one overwhelming state. Like you're putting words in their mouth. You made that shit up, Heritage. The BLM did not say they wanted to replace the family with the state. They just said they want to replace the family with community ties, you know, like change the definition of kinship maybe, so that it's not just father, mother, you know, daughter, son, but also includes a wider community that works together. I don't know. It takes a village. It's wisdom, right? And also, I'm a bit confused regarding this part. The BLM wants to destroy the economic system that has lifted more people from poverty than any other, because I'm pretty sure that BLM has not once addressed Chinese communism, right? Like, BLM is about police violence. I mean, on their website, they say something about this family thing, but there's no way they're talking about destroying Chinese communism. It's really strange, you know? I mean, because we all know that the economic system that's lifted the most people from poverty than any other has been Chinese communism, which is actually state capitalism, right? Which is oddly kind of another argument for capitalism. But the capitalists don't make the argument because, you know, these sort of neoliberal, conservative, you know, Heritage Foundation types think that communist China is like the big evil, the big bad, because it's fucking communist, even though it's just really another kind of capitalism. It's not good. I'm not saying that, you know, communism is good. You know, they did lift more people from poverty than any other country, but yeah, anyway, it's very confusing. It's very, very confusing. But this video from Heritage about BLM it's made in bad faith. And it's obviously designed to convince the gullible that Black Lives Matter is trying to destroy America, and it shouldn't surprise us that this video was made by Heritage Foundation, because, you know, it's kind of got one toe in the whole white supremacist thing, and delegitimizing struggles for racial justice and recognition is well in keeping with, you know, what Heritage Foundation does as the political conservative think tank that it is. And by the way, that video was by Mike Gonzalez, which you might remember from the 1776 report. He's one of the co-authors of the 1776 report. He's kind of like, in my mind, you know, Mike Gonzalez is really the proto-fascist working in the Heritage Foundation. Like I said at the beginning, you know, we're going to try to answer the question, is the Heritage Foundation a fascist propaganda machine? And, you know, I mean, spoiler, it's not really. There are moments of fascist propaganda, and a lot of them just happen to be written by this Gonzalez dude, but by Mike Gonzalez. But it's not an overt 100% fascist propaganda machine. There's a lot of like market fundamentalism in there, and there's a lot of sort of jingoistic foreign policy stuff. But when I'm looking for fascism, I'm looking for like this cult of American superiority and the idea that we have to overcome a kind of deep degeneracy in our society. And this video would be an example of that. Again, Mike Gonzalez. It's not surprising because the degeneracy is this Black Lives Matter movement. It seems to be this sort of something that's dangerous and threatens the very fabric of American society. They want to destroy the family. It's a lot of fear mongering around this, and there might be a fascist kind of element to it. Or of course, Mike Gonzalez's book, the Plot to Change America, which is all about how like the leftist identity politics are trying to destroy America. And the premise of this book, it's phenomenal how accurately Mike Gonzalez was able to project what he's doing at the Heritage Foundation, what the Heritage Foundation is doing, in truth, what they're actually doing compared to what they say they're doing, and then project that onto invented enemy, the left. So it says, like, if you look at the summary of the book on Amazon. So the first myth that this book exposes is that identity politics is a grassroots movement, when from the beginning it has been and continues to be an elite project. So he goes on, presumably in the book, I mean, I haven't read it, and I have just no interest in reading it. He probably is going to talk about George Soros and those wealthy Jews that are funding leftist projects, because a lot of these conspiracy proto-fascist thinking ends up pegging responsibility on the Jews again, which I also don't really understand why they're so obsessed with that theme. Like, it seems like that theme has been thoroughly discredited, like really thoroughly. And in fact, even to just sort of reference it in passing seems to not do you any possible favors. Like, I mean, are you really going to talk about a wealthy Jew and say that this Jewish man is somehow responsible for the decline of the American, morality? Like, oof. That's no good. But what's really interesting is he says, look, this is not the leftist identity politics is not grassroots. It's actually an elite project. But that's exactly what's happening with the Heritage Foundation. They say they're giving power to the people, but that's not it. They're not. This is an elite think tank funded and controlled by the wealthiest people in the world with a huge amount of influence, and they are delivering conservative ideology in bite-sized chunks to everybody, to politicians, to people on the ground, to everybody. And you might think that this sort of conservative ideology that's developing right now, and some of it is very fascist in tone and content. You might think that this is a grassroots thing, that this is developing spontaneously from angry people, angry for whatever reason, whether it be economic reasons or racist reasons, whatever it is. This is a spontaneous development. But no, this is an elite project. The conservatism that we're seeing, this very sort of nasty proto-fascist conservatism that we're seeing taking hold in the United States and abroad, is the product of a lot of billionaires funneling money into think tank organizations like the Heritage Foundation. It's happening from the top, not from the bottom. And I think that that's not the case with the left so much. To some degree, of course. I mean, maybe George Soros does fund a lot of leftist projects. Whether that can be considered some sort of grand global conspiracy to undermine capitalism, I doubt it. I don't think George Soros is out to undermine capitalism as one of the major beneficiaries of capitalism. I mean, he is a very wealthy individual. He's been very successful in his life. I don't think he's going to try to destroy that system. I think he just, wants to fund leftist projects that he thinks are interesting. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, of course, leftist propaganda and leftist ideology might also be funded in part by wealthy billionaires. But I don't think you can compare it to conservative ideology, right? I mean, there's a George Soros out there, but for every George Soros, there's like a half a dozen, 2 dozen Koch brothers. Did you know that Papa Koch built factories for the Nazis? It's a fun little factoid there. There's a bunch of Koch brothers and DeVos families and Amway fortunes and Mellon banking fortunes, and just there's all of this money that's being funneled into these conservative think tanks. So anyway, I think the book is, but it's all about how America is basically being destroyed by leftists, and how red-blooded Americans need to stand up against that and take their country back. And it's definitely, fascist propaganda. So cool, good. Let's talk about. It was a little bit of a digression. I went off on Mike Gonzalez, man. That guy, it triggers Chell. All right. Let's talk a little bit about conservatism and progressivism as it is portrayed by the Heritage Foundation in another video. And oh my God, this video is such utter bullshit. I'll put the links to all of this in the bottom, by the way. Although I don't even know if you should watch it, because just giving them a click, I don't know if it's worth it. But I mean, I'm fucking serious. Like, I don't know how any self-respecting human can create such garbage as the video conservatism versus progressivism. Yeah. I mean, I think really my theory is that at some point it was just too exhausting for Heritage Foundation to always have to disguise their dumpster fire ideology as like legitimate scientific reporting. And that this video was just them like, oh, fuck it. Let's just make the dumpster fire clear here, because, oh my God. Right. But okay, let's do this. Take a deep breath. So according to this video, the first main difference between conservatives, and progressives is that conservatives ask themselves, what can I do for myself, for my family, my community, and my fellow citizens? Well, progressives ask themselves, what is unfair? What am I owed? What has offended me today? And what must my country do for me? So there you go. That's the independent research. That's the scientific academic output. Yep, that's right. Because as a progressive myself, I'm a progressive, and when I get home in the evening after a hard day at work, I sit on the sofa with a nice, half calf, half decaf chai mocha latte, and I ask myself, what offended me today? I make a list. I write it down. I have my what offended me list, where I write down everything that offended me every day, because that's what progressives do. Yeah, obviously, right? And but does anyone else think it's a little strange that this video is also implicitly arguing that thinking about fairness should be avoided? Well, it's not strange, because the Heritage Foundation wants you to get the fuck back to work. And maternity leave? What's this, communist Venezuela? You're lucky we pay you any wage at all. And if you don't like it, you can go die under a bridge, right? Like, because progressives think, what is unfair? And I mean, of course, they frame it as unfair. So it sounds like, like a petulant, spoiled child. Like, that's unfair. Like that, when I was working at that summer camp and we were playing hide and seek, and that like 12-year-old girl like screamed at me, "Das ist unfair," and I got really angry and started using a bunch of bad words, and luckily didn't get fired for that. But, that's what they are trying to make the progressive sound like. But really, questions of fairness should be asked. Right? Like, is it fair that the vast majority of wealth created by employees is just captured by the owners of the company so that they can buy another Lamborghini? Is that fair? I mean, again, Jeff Bezos cannot deliver all those packages. He simply can't do it by himself. Lieferando, the delivery service, the food delivery service, the guys who own Lieferando can't deliver all that food by themselves. They rely on their employees to do those things. And then their employees create a huge amount of value, because we love Amazon. I mean, I'm actually trying not to order from Amazon anymore, and I've been successful at it recently. But I mean, Amazon has great prices, and it's unbelievably convenient, especially in the middle of a global fucking pandemic where we shouldn't really be going out so often. And Lieferando, food delivery, same thing, so convenient, perfect for global pandemic. These people are making windfall profits, and they're doing so because of the people who deliver the food, and because the people who work at the warehouse and sort the boxes and send the boxes and deliver the boxes. These are the people that are creating this value. If those people disappeared, Amazon would have nothing. Lieferando would have nothing. Yeah, these people are working hard. They're creating value, and they're getting paid shit for it. They're getting paid nothing. They're barely able to pay for rent and food on that wage. And meanwhile, the owners of these companies are living at large on their private yachts, inside larger yachts, parked at their private islands in the Virgin Islands, right? It's fucking ridiculous. And I think we can ask about fairness. Is this a fair situation? And if it's not fair, what can be done? What can be done to make the situation more fair? And who's going to do it? Who's going to make the situation more fair? Because is it going to be the company? Probably not. Is it going to be the government? Well, not if think tanks like the Heritage Foundation continue to wield such immense influence in government, because the Heritage Foundation is clearly on the side of the owners. They want a beneficial regulatory environment for shareholders and CEOs and owners and board members and billionaires. That's what they want. They don't want to have to steal less money. They want to be allowed to steal as much money as they can, and they don't give a shit if their employees die poor and sick in the rain. Yeah. So anyway, but of course, the difference between conservatives and progressives is conservatives don't ask questions about fairness. They simply say, like, what can I do for myself? What can I do for my family? What can I do for my country? And, one answer to that, what could I do for myself and for my family, is, I don't know, like, seize the means of production. But anyway. So anyway, the video continues. The traditional American ethic of achievement, this is a quote from the video, quote, "The traditional American ethic of achievement gives way to the progressive ethic of aggrievement." Well, thank you, Dr. Seuss. Actually, I don't mean that. Dr. Seuss was a visionary. What I mean to say is, fuck you, Heritage Foundation. Also, aggrievement is not the progressive ethic. The progressive ethic is justice, democracy, self-determination. Yeah, the conservative ethic, of course, is bend over and spread cheek for your corporate masters. Yeah? Okay, I mean, maybe that's a little unfair. I mean, talking about fairness. I mean, the conservative ethic is definitely the big lie. I mean, that's what it is, right? The big lie. Progressives are not trying to destroy America, even though the conservatives would have you believe that. Trump lost the election. You know, one really fun part about the Heritage Foundation, and here I go digressing, is, they have a database of all election fraud since the 80s. And it's something like 1,223 examples. Though, to be fair, some of those examples are like, there was 10,000 ballots falsified by some guy in the 90s at one point, right? And and at first, when I first saw that, I'm thinking, Jesus, they're just jumping on this Trump won the election bandwagon. But no, that database way predates Trump's thing. In fact, you might even go so far as to think that was the inspiration. Trump was taking a card from the Heritage Foundation playbook there. And the Heritage Foundation is super proud of their handling of Trump. They're like, man, we got Trump to pass of our agenda, of our 5-point agenda. Trump passed 4 of the 5 points. We fucking love the guy. And it's not unrealistic to believe that Trump was just, taking a play from the Heritage Foundation book and being like, oh, this election was fraudulent. It was stolen from me. Because, I mean, hell, look at the Heritage Foundation. They have a database going back to the 80s of every single example of election fraud. So we know that and I mean, it's all Democrats doing it. So, we know that this is how Dems win elections. They cheat, right? So it's a big lie. It's a big fucking lie, because Trump lost the election. And also, Democrats do not run an international child pedo rings. It's not what's happening, And George Soros is not part of an international Jewish cabal trying to turn the world Marxist. It's a big lie, but conservatives believe it. The Heritage Foundation repeats it. The Heritage Foundation sources it, because the big lie is the conservative ethic. Now, I'm going to skip to the third point in this video. There are 3 points that I just screw the second point. I didn't even watch it. The first point was bad enough. The third point's even worse. So I'm going to quote the third point. Third point from the video, Heritage Foundation, on the difference between conservatives and progressives. Quote, "Whether it's the Second Amendment, immigration, or putting limits on abortion, if we the people don't pass laws progressives approve, they turn to judges, executive orders, and government bureaucrats behind closed doors to overturn the will of voters." Okay, well, so wait a second. We, the people, pass laws like the Second Amendment, immigration, and putting limits on abortion? So when other laws are passed that contradict those? It's not the people passing them because progressives aren't people, or maybe they're just not U.S. people. Because it seems to me like we the people passed laws about like making abortion legal, didn't we? Didn't that happen? I don't know, but no. But of course, conservatives would never use judges or executive orders to get what they want, right? Like that's just never happened, right? Republicans, like you don't rely on judges or executive orders to get what you want, right? Okay, well, the video continues. Quote, whatever one may think about the wisdom of hiking the minimum wage, banning plastic straws, or removing controversial historical monuments, conservatives believe voters closest to the issues should be the ones making such decisions for their communities, not lawmakers in Washington or a panel of judges 5 states away. But don't you also have an article, Heritage Foundation, supporting like the Electoral College and how good that is? And isn't that kind of like a lawmakers in Washington kind of thing, or at least? Also, wait, a panel of judges 5 states away? Like 5 states away from what? And which court? Which court is this again? The one making decision about local communities? Is a court, a panel of judges 5 states away? I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just meaningless bullshit, which would make sense because I mean, pretty much everything that we've seen from the Heritage Foundation has been meaningless bullshit. So, but I actually agree. I agree that the people closest to the issues should be the ones making decisions. So when local people get together to tear down monuments built to traitors and racists, I'm all for that. I don't even think we need to make any rules about it. I'm against authoritarian solution. I don't think we need to call in the police or make some rules about like preserving these monuments or not preserving these monuments. Fuck it. Like if the monument's offensive because it's monumentalizing a traitor and a slave owner and a racist, then just tear it down. Just like get mad, go out there with a bunch of people and fucking tear it down on your own initiative, because you're the ones that it affects, right? You're the people from the town. You get the people from the town together and be like, we don't want this monument in our town. We're going to tear it down. And, maybe the town is, the politicians in the town are a bunch of conservative pricks and they're like, no, but this is historical heritage and blah, blah, blah. They just tear it down. So yeah, I mean, this has all just been like a taste of the quality of the political propaganda coming from the Heritage Foundation. I mean, it's definitely not research. It's definitely not academic. And honestly, it's not even that great propaganda, but for whatever reason, they're extremely powerful. And to round out the picture a little bit and to convince you a little bit better, dear listener, that the foundation is indeed the conservative brain where conservative thoughts are born, let me just quickly run through a few more headlines that you see from Heritage Reports. So, they have one from February 23rd, 2021. This is a really recent one. They have it's taking place actually as I record this podcast. It's a virtual event. The Promise to America's Children, Protecting Kids from Extreme Gender Ideology and Laws. They say in the sort of blurb for this online event, radical gender ideology endangers children's minds, bodies, and relationships with their parents, and the Equality Act would cement it into law. So, of course, I mean, the Heritage Foundation is 100% against trans rights because it's going to hurt kids, which is a classic conservative conspiracy trope. Remember when preschools there was running a pedophile ring, and all these preschool teachers were like taken to court, and it turns out there was no pedophile ring, but all these conservatives, like pearl clutching maniacs, got all fucking up in arms against it. And of course, there's the Pizzagate, conspiracy in Washington D.C. It's always about protecting the children. This is Heritage Foundation doing a nod to the whole protect the children narrative. This time in the context of trans rights. Of course, it's a bunch of bullshit. There's another one. They have the Obligations of Family Life, a response to modern liberalism. I think this is interesting because one of the hallmarks of a lot of fascist thought is to sort of take aim at perceived problems or weaknesses of liberalism. And I think in contemporary times, at the moment, even conservatives don't really take aim at liberalism so much. It's more taking aim at the left and, woke identity politics. That's kind of the big bad for conservatives these days. And it's always, I always get, goosebumps when somebody who's ostensibly not a fascist takes aim at liberalism, because it's like they missed that memo that actually, if you take aim at liberalism, you sound too much like a fascist, because that's kind of one of those things that fascists always do. So call it by a different name. Call it leftism now, and not liberalism. But yeah, this is an amazing article. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but basically the guy argues that family values are important, and he says, okay, there's one quick quote. He says, quote unquote, the new reformed view of family values of letting anybody marry anybody, right? It's crazy. This new reformed view emphasizes companionship, autonomy, and individual self-fulfillment as the chief purposes of marriage. And since the middle of the 20th century, this new view has slowly displaced the traditional view that marriage involves love centered in no small part around procreation and child rearing. Advocates for the family have worried that this change is at the root of significant social ills resulting from divorce, single parenthood, and the loss of a culture friendly to marriage and family life. Also, fascist trope. We're in a war for the culture. We're losing our culture. It's about the culture. We fight for the culture. And but good, yeah. So it's interesting, because the guy basically says, here you have this conservative think tank that's all about autonomy and individualism and freedom, but when it comes to marriage, suddenly none of those things are important anymore, but rather autonomy and individualism and freedom just leads to divorce, single parenthood, and the loss of culture. And what you really want is marriage centered around procreation and child rearing. That's what marriage should be about. Otherwise, you're going to lose the culture. Yeah. So all of these conservative values that we usually have, we don't have for this particular issue, for some reason. That's kind of the nuts and bolts of the Heritage Foundation. I hope you're still with me. I hope you found this rather enlightening. And I guess we return to the question: is it fash? Is it not fash? And again, I think that based on my relatively deep dive into the output, the so-called academic and research output of the Heritage Foundation, it's not overtly fascist. There are elements, there are moments of fascism. But I want to say that one element of fascism that I think is kind of not gained a lot of traction from a lot of these academics who do research into the nature of fascism and stuff recently is this adherence to this big lie, to this willingness to participate in untruth and disingenuousness and false research and this sort of thing. And I think that this is very much central to a kind of growing fascist ideology. And we also see it used to a great extent by by Mussolini, by Hitler. They had, a lot of this big lie, especially the Nazis, concerning this sort of Jewish conspiracy, which is the same conspiracy that a lot of these same groups repeat today. And I think from that perspective, if you accept the premise that part of the development of fascist thought or the development of a fascist movement includes the creation of a bunch of basically a false reality, based on conspiracies and a total indifference to accurate scholarship. Yeah, this presentation of scholarship that's actually just misleading misinformation. Yeah, and if you accept that is a core of fascist movements, then from this perspective, you could say 100% that the Heritage Foundation is a fascist propaganda machine, because there is absolutely no actual regard for academic standards whatsoever. That of all the things that I take away from my research into the Heritage Foundation, the most important is that there is simply no regard for academic standards whatsoever from this group, from what they're doing. And so, so there you have it, Triangulating Fash, Part 1, the Heritage Foundation. It's remarkable to me that this organization is as powerful as it is. Hopefully, I've opened your eyes a little bit today. Hopefully, you guys are thinking, "Wow, fuck, that's scary." If you are, then I've done my job. And I'd like to thank my Patreons for their support. Thank you, Logan and Vanessa. Oh, I got Patreon. People like me. So yeah, totally. That's awesome. I'm super happy about that. I'm considering how best to use. I mean, of course, I only got 2. It's just the beginning. I was thinking maybe I would get myself a subscription to End My Times or something like that, which would also really, I think, help me do better research for the podcast. I really appreciate you guys supporting me. I think that's totally awesome. And yeah, and I'm only $6 now. I'm only $6 away from making a TikTok account and dancing and expressing my thanks to my Patreons in the form of interpretive dance. So, which I have no experience doing, and is actually totally legitimate art form. So, it's kind of inappropriate of me to just to botch it. So, but I'm gonna dance my gratitude for you guys on TikTok. I'm only $6 away from doing that. So yeah, visit my Patreon site. Consider being one of my Patreons. You'll be in good company. Thank you, Logan. Thank you, Vanessa. You guys are awesome. And I will. You guys, you're gonna hear from me again very soon. So have a great day. Thank you so much.